Hi there, and welcome to my channel. Well, today I'm coming to you from lovely Lincolnwood, Chicago, Illinois. I've never been here before. It was kind of an impromptu trip because my husband had to come here for work, so I just decided to tag along. So hopefully I'll be taking you in some fun adventures this week as I kind of find my way around to new things to do in Chicago. I've been in Chicago before, but I'm going to try to see if I can find new things that I haven't done before. So keep your fingers crossed that it works out. I'm here at this little park that has sculptures. I don't know if they're in great shape anymore. I'm gonna go check that one out. That looks like a birthday cake. Apparently has like 80 sculptures. I don't know if I can do it, but let's give it a try. I didn't quite make it to all 80 of the sculptures, but after a few, I met up with my husband for lunch. My husband had traveled to Chicago many times before, and in one of his trips, he stumbled upon the Puerto Rican district in Chicago, which I didn't even know existed. The Paseo Boricua is located on Division Street, which is between Western and California Avenues, in the neighborhood of Humboldt Park, more commonly known as Little Puerto Rico. This 6-block area is flanked at each end by 59-foot-tall Puerto Rican flags made of steel, which were installed in 1995 as a public art project. Although unfortunately the National Museum of Puerto Rican Arts and Culture was closed when I was there, we were able to find a local place for lunch called El Mofonguito. The next day, I headed to downtown Chicago to check out an event I had seen on Facebook. Being a Harry Potter enthusiast, I couldn't resist checking this one out. It was called Harry Potter Magic at Play, and it is a pop-up experiential hands-on environment that brings the wizarding world to life through hands-on magical moments and active play. It is done on 3 floors, and they try to represent most of the iconic areas and activities from the Harry Potter series, from Privet Drive to the Platform 9 3/4, the Quidditch match, etc., etc. And it had lots of photo opportunities.
You shall explore.
After checking out the exhibit, I walked around the mall a bit and checked out the fun Lego store right next to the exhibit. Especially love to see the skyline of Chicago done entirely with Legos. Chicago is one of my favorite cities, and it holds dear memories for me from my college days. I did my first 2 years of college in Valparaiso University in Indiana, which is only about an hour away from Chicago. So, one of my favorite things to do on the weekends was to take the bus and go explore the city. It is always fun to see how much it has changed and yet how much it stayed the same, especially around Michigan Avenue, also known as the Magnificent Mile. Now, I still remember very clearly going with my parents around downtown as we looked for winter clothes for me before starting college. Coming from a tropical island like Puerto Rico, I didn't have any of the necessities to be able to withstand a fall, let alone a winter season in Chicago. I was really in awe of all the beautiful gardens created along the Magnificent Mile. Every block had a different array of plants and flowers, each with its own theme, it seemed. I later found out that this was part of a beautification project in the Magnificent Mile. I couldn't help myself and wanted to take pictures of each and every flower bed I saw along the way. And then, as I continued my walk down Michigan Avenue, I spotted the Starbucks Reserve Roastery building. I had read about Starbucks Reserve, like the one in Milan, but I had no idea there was one in Chicago, and I had no idea of how amazing the structure and design were inside. I don't know if you guys have heard, but did you know it took 47 years for a Starbucks to finally be in Italy? They only agreed because Starbucks created a very special research store in Milan, all cladded out with the finest Italian marble and Italian products. From what I read years ago, it is a magnificent building. So I was really eager to check this one out and see if it kind of matched up like the one in Milan. And wow, did it really blew me away. And if you haven't heard about what a Starbucks Reserve Roastery is supposed to be, let me read you their description on the website for their Chicago store. This is what they say. It's a multi-sensory destination of epic proportions. The Chicago Roastery is 5 stories of coffee theater, both workshop and stage. It is a 3-dimensional window into the coffee journey. Isn't that pompous? Without a doubt, the most impressive structure in the entire place is that central piece that you see in the middle. It's actually a 56-foot cask that actually is the centerpiece of the entire roastery. It is a sculptural work of art that acts like a multi-sensory hourglass, with the roasted beans as the grains of sand. The skin itself is perforated and slit to reveal views of freshly roasted coffee moving through tubes in all directions. That is their description, and from what I told you is at first when I kept looking at the ceiling, I kept seeing those tubes and I kept thinking, I wonder if the coffee is supposed to go through there. And I could never see the coffee until way later when I came back for a cup of coffee myself, and I did hear the little rumbling of the coffee beans. Of course, by the time I would get my camera, the beans had gone through, so I couldn't catch them. But I thought that was the most interesting thing, to actually see them coming all the way from the first floor, all the way through all the floors, and through those little tubes being fed into the proper places. It was really amazing. They were also offering samples of their whiskey barrel aged coffee on the first floor. I had never heard of that before. The coffee actually tasted like it had whiskey in it. The girl giving the samples kept saying, it does not have any alcohol, it doesn't have any alcohol. And these are some of the barrels that in display that are used for that purpose. Since the entire building was made with glass storefronts from floor to ceiling, all throughout each of the 5 stories you could see amazing views of Michigan Avenue. Since I had my food tour coming up, I couldn't buy anything to eat or drink, but I promised myself if I happen to walk in front of this again, I am going to stop. And sure enough, I saw it like 6 or 7 times during my stay in Chicago. So yes, I had to stop by and had a coffee and a pastry, just $18, such a bargain. I continued down Michigan Avenue to my next activity, which was a gangster and food tour. It was on the other side of the city, so I took a leisurely 20-minute walk there, getting to know the city once again. Our meeting point was Hoyt's Restaurant in the Royal Sonesta, Chicago downtown. It was a small group, and here's a description of the tour. Savor prime steak, indulge in Chicago's own deep dish pizza, and relish the world-renowned Chicago hot dog, all while exploring the streets walked by Al Capone's fiercest enemies and closest associates. Those may see in the tunnel gangsters emerged from after escaping jail, or the bullet holes left behind after one of Prohibition's most brazen assassinations. After meeting with our small group, we walked for a bit on the Riverwalk off to our first destination, Harry Carey's Steakhouse. Long before this was one of Chicago's most famous steakhouses, it was home to the notorious enforcer of the Al Capone gang, Frank Nitti. He lived in an apartment on the 4th floor with his wife Annette, whose family owned the building. This was a convenient hideout for him, as the courthouse building was clearly visible from the apartment.
Tough, which actually made him scarier.
Nitti was a small man. His height wasn't over 5'6" or 5'7". Had rather broad-looking shoulders, though. Black hair that he wore very carefully combed and slicked back.
While Nitti kept his head down and focused on his job, his friend Al Capone spent more time enjoying the fruits of his labor. Capone was known to spend long hours gambling and drinking, often paying thousands of dollars at a time.
Capone was this very likable, personable character, and then Frank Nitti's real business-driven.
Al Capone had this desire to have a lot of publicity.
Relics from Nitti's life of crime were uncovered in 1998 when an electrician drilled a hole in the wall of the basement that revealed a hidden room spanning the width of the upstairs bar. This room was used as a hideout during the Prohibition era, as well as a passageway to Chicago's underground tunnel system, allowing Nitti and his associates to come and go without being seen on the streets of Chicago. One of the most exciting finds was a large safe and also Nitti's personal address book listing the home addresses and phone numbers of powerful government officials and mobsters. For our second stop on the tour, we had to have some deep dish pizza, so we went not to the original Pizzeria Uno, but to Pizzeria Due. Apparently, when they decided to expand the restaurant, they were going to continue numbering them sequentially, but they soon realized that was a dumb idea and stopped doing it after Due. Our final stop was at Jay's, this small hole-in-the-wall kind of place that has been there forever. We finalized our tour with a Chicago hot dog with all the fixings. I had read there would be fireworks that day at the Navy Pier, so my husband picked me up and we went there for dinner and the fireworks show. Even before becoming an interior designer, one of the things that have always attracted me about Chicago was its amazing architecture and its world-famous buildings and structures. So the next day, I decided to visit the Chicago Architecture Center, which I had heard of but had not had a chance to visit yet on my previous visits to the city. The Chicago City Model Experience is the main attraction in the Chicago Gallery, and it features more than 4,000 buildings in the city. A film is played every 20 minutes showing the story of Chicago's early growth, its rebirth after the Great Chicago Fire, and its ever-changing skyline, which includes some of the world's first skyscrapers and iconic modern towers made of steel and glass. On the second floor, they have a temporary exhibit called Reframe, the Future of Cities in Wood. It explores the many positive aspects of building with mass timber, including sustainability and safety, and it also reflects on biophilia, the human instinct to seek connections with nature. I found it very interesting. By this point, I had done so much walking, my feet and my legs were complaining. So I purposely looked for an experience that would require less walking. As a lover of theater, I looked to see if there would be any shows in the afternoon I could attend. And to my surprise, I found one at the Looking Glass Theater in downtown. I had never heard of the show or the theater, but I figured, hey, why not? So I headed there after going to the Architecture Center. To my surprise, I ended up back at the water tower, the same place I was the day before, since the theater is located at the historic water tower pump building, which is still in use. They have carved a small section of the building and created a black box theater. It was founded in 1988 by graduates of Northwestern University. The Looking Glass Theater Company is a nationwide leader in the creation and presentation of new, cutting-edge theatrical works and in sharing its ensemble-based theatrical techniques with Chicago area students. It was recipient of the 2011 Tony Awards for Outstanding Regional Theater. It has built a national reputation for artistic excellence and ensemble-based theatrical innovation. The show was called Lucy and Charlie's Honeymoon. It had low expectations since it was supposed to be a comedy and musical with folk and country music. I mean, I love musicals, but I'm not so sure about that type of music. But to my surprise, I was absolutely blown away by how good this show was. I cannot say enough good things about it. It was quirky, it was fun, it just knew how to talk about very sensitive subjects in a very humorous and touching way. If you happen to be in the area, check it out. It closes in September. The guy who wrote the show, including all the music and all the lyrics, actually plays the lead. So talented. And the cast not only sings, they play multiple parts and also play multiple instruments. There is no band per se. The same actors pick up an instrument when they are not on scene. And everyone was so talented and funny. After the show, I went on to have a late lunch. During one of my many walks up and down Michigan Avenue, I saw this restaurant on the second floor. It had very high and ornate ceilings that caught my eye, so I went there. It was the Grand Lux Cafe, also created by the same people who made the Cheesecake Factory. I had a very delicious Cuban sandwich, and better yet, got a dozen make-to-order chocolate chip cookies that I was able to bring to my hard-working hubby. The next day, I ventured back to downtown to do some more adventuring on my own, as my husband had more work to do. One of the interesting things that I wanted to check out was the preparations for the upcoming NASCAR race that was going to take place the following weekend. From what I read, this would be the first time NASCAR would be doing a race inside of a city. The race was taking place right by the Art Institute, which was my next destination, so I didn't have to deviate from my plans. The Art Institute was a favorite place of mine when I was a college student, and even though I have visited it since, this time I would be spending the whole day here, which was a bit of a luxury. So I decided to start at the top and work my way down, which I soon learned is not what most people do. Finding the third floor alone was a bit of a scavenger hunt, since the museum is now a collection of 3 different buildings. But I found it. Soon after, it was time for lunch, so I went to the restaurant at the museum, which is called The Market. You get to pick what you want from the digital screen, and they text you when it's ready to be picked up. They have this nice outdoor area to sit and enjoy your food. The chicken sandwich and dessert that I had were one of the best things I had in my whole trip. Very good. Even though my feet were still aching from all the walking, I had to check out the Thorn miniature rooms, one of my most favorite things in the museum, which, by the way, I just found out about it a few years ago. I did not know about it when I first came to the museum, but they've been around for a long time and they are unbelievable. If you haven't seen them, go check them out. Another thing I never noticed before was the spectacular Tiffany window, which are one of the must-sees per the museum's what to see in an hour. I learned that this window is not flat on the back. Some areas are more like a topographical map and are as thick as 5 panes of glass. And for me, no visit to this museum would be complete without seeing this painting. I don't know what it is, but I was taking a lot of art history in college at the time when I first saw it. I was so excited to see it in person. So now, it is kind of a fun memory to how excited I was to see it, and how large it seemed at the time. Of course, now it seems smaller, but I still love it. After the museum, I still had to kill a lot of time before my husband could pick me up, so I went to the Millennium Park, which is right next to the Art Institute. So of course, I had to do the obligatory photo at the Cloud Gate, also known as the Chicago Bean. This was definitely not around at all when I first came to Chicago in 1978. Also then continued walking around the park and checked out the pavilion, where they were going to be having a free concert later on. The construction of the pavilion created legal controversy, given that there are historic limitations on the height of buildings in Grant Park. To avoid these legal restrictions, the city classified the bandshell as a work of art rather than a building. Another thing I had heard of but had not had a chance to do was to walk on the amazing BP pedestrian bridge designed by Frank Gehry. It spans Columbus Drive to connect Maggie Daley Park with Millennium Park, both parts of the larger Grant Park. It opened along with the rest of Millennium Park on July 16, 2004. BP Bridge is described as snake-like because of its curving form. Designed to bear a heavy load without structural problems caused by its own weight, it has won awards for its use of sheet metal. The bridge is known for its aesthetics, and Gehry's style is seen in its biomorphic allusions and extensive sculptural use of stainless steel plates to express abstraction, which again is very typical of all of his buildings. If you've seen any of these other buildings like the Walt Disney Hall and the Bilbao Museum, the Guggenheim, this is kind of the stuff he does all the time. Finally, on our last day in Chicago, we decided to take a later flight so my husband could get to do something fun after a long, hard week of working. One of the things on my list that I had not gotten to do was to go to the Museum of Science and Industry. I had some faint memory of coming here back in 1978 with my dad, and enjoying it a lot, but I had not been back since. So we went, and even though our time was limited, we thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's definitely one of my favorite museums of all time. This is Yesterday's Main Street, which is a mock-up of a Chicago street from the early 20th century, complete with a cobblestone roadway, old-fashioned light fixtures, fire hydrants, and several shops, including the precursors to several Chicago-based businesses. Unlike the other shops, the Nickelodeon cinema can be entered and is functional, and plays silent films throughout the day. The Great Train Story is a 3,500 square foot A-show scale model railroad and recounts the story of transportation from Chicago to Seattle. Take Flight features the first Boeing 727 jet plane in commercial service, donated by the United Airlines, with one wing removed and holes cut out in the fuselage to facilitate visitor access. One of the most popular film actresses of her time, Colleen Moore, assembled a legion of her industry colleagues to help craft this miniature home of fantastic proportions. She shared during the Great Depression, touring the country to raise funds for children's charities. Then this one-of-a-kind castle was welcomed into its new home at the museum, where it has enchanted children of all ages since 1949.
When she was the ambassador to Italy and had her first audience with the Pope. Cinderella. The vases on each side of the door going into the Great Hall are made of carved amber that is over 5. The tapestries on the wall, which are needlepoint made in Vienna, are the smallest stitches that have ever been stitched. You can hardly see them, even under a magnet.
The German submarine U-505 is one of just 6 German submarines captured by the Allies during World War II and has been in this place since 1954. Well, thank you so much for joining me in this journey, exploring things I had never done before in a city I've been to many times before. It goes to show you that when we look at something with fresh eyes, we can still feel that wonder of exploration and discover things we had never seen before. Until the next one.